The following content is meant purely for educational and informational purposes and should not be relied upon as financial, investment, legal, tax, or any other professional advice. This is the Fundamentals Podcast, where we demystify crypto and help you navigate this ever-evolving internet-native economy. In this episode, I'm joined by Arno Bauer, a senior solution architect at BNB Chain. BNB Chain is a smart contract platform for decentralized applications and currently the most widely used blockchain. To cover the basics, blockchains are smart contract execution environments that allow for the permissionless creation of smart contract-based businesses, or DAOs. The problem that blockchains solve is that the time and money it takes to incorporate your business varies greatly between countries and jurisdictions, and it's often extremely time-consuming and costly to sell products and services across borders. For blockchain-based businesses, many parts of their business operations are global from day one. Blockchains bring down the cost of incorporation to one function call. Once a DAO is deployed on a blockchain, it inherits their advantageous features: access to global capital markets, global participation from contributors and customers, transparent and highly automated rules of operation, and an immutable audit trail. The Layer 1 blockchain market was initially dominated by Bitcoin, an extremely simple and limited contract execution environment. With the launch of Ethereum, it became possible to, in theory, deploy arbitrarily complex contracts or programs on a blockchain. Now, as we've seen the launch of new blockchains that have optimized different aspects such as speed, interoperability, cost efficiency, privacy, etc., it has become possible to deploy arbitrarily complex contracts also in practice, as scalability is no longer a limitation. BNB Chain is made up of an ecosystem of blockchains, which comprises of the BNB Beacon Chain for staking and governance, the BNB Smart Chain, which is an EVM-compatible smart contract settlement layer, zkBNB, a Layer 2 zero-knowledge scaling solution for developers to build large-scale BSC-based apps, and finally, BNB Greenfield for decentralized data storage. In this episode with Arno, we discuss what the BNB Chain's core value proposition is, what optimizations they've focused on, and how they're positioned within the market. Also, we cover the BNB Chain's economic model, the best metrics to measure and value blockchains, how economic sustainability should be addressed, the most exciting things happening on the BNB chain right now, who the core contributors behind the blockchain are, and more. Hello, Arno. Welcome to the Fundamentals Podcast. It is great to have you on.
Thanks. Glad to be here and looking forward for the coming hour.
Awesome. I'm excited to dive into the details behind the BNB chain. And to set the stage, I thought it'd be great if you can start off by explaining what the core value proposition of the BNB chain is.
Right. So our core proposition of value is really to accelerate adoption for a digital asset and blockchain technology and really onboarding like the next million or billion of users for Web3. We really want to achieve this by having, through our strong infrastructure, scalable infrastructure as well, to have a mass adoption. That's like our core proposition and focus.
Yeah, I love that. Now, as we've seen over the years, quite a few blockchain projects have spawned in this space. What would you say are the top optimizations that the BNB chain really tried to get to work compared to previously launched blockchains?
Right. So I think initially our main focus was providing as well, let's say, a cheaper L1. So we really saw that, okay, for a lot of users out there, it's like not easy to run on-chain transaction. So of course, like blockchain is great on paper, but how we can make it affordable as well for user, that I think was one of the main points as well. But beside that, I think one of the other main point was like around scalability and throughput as well. I know a lot of people are kind of saying that we are kind of centralized because we have a lower amount of validator compared to other. We do try to expand, of course, our validator set, but this kind of solution helped us to have a stronger infrastructure and more robust infrastructure as well to really be able to have like a higher throughput, which means that, for example, our block space is much bigger compared to ETH or other blockchain, for example, and as well our like block time. So we have a block every 3 seconds, for example, versus other, which is every 10 or 20 or more. So we really try to achieve a more like professional infrastructure, if I could call it so.
Yeah, that's great. And digging into that a bit more, how would you describe like the core problems that your current model solves for, one, builders, and then two, users?
Right. So for builders, I mean, it's not easy. So for a lot of years, like builders, only at school, for example, I learned to handle more, let's say, synchronous development. So not something that is synchronous where I need to wait a few seconds before validating, let's say, a data state. So this is something that we really try to focus as well to make sure that the state of the data is finalized quickly, which is really something that for developers or for users, having this feedback of a quick system is something that is important. And it's something that we are kind of losing when we are into Web3, because Web3 is more decentralized. So there's more naturally like the network effect means that we need to wait a certain amount of time before everything is really finalized. So we really try to achieve a faster finality to make sure that our developer and user, when they're using, for example, a game application or a DeFi, everything that is happening on chain is validated quickly and finalized as well quickly without waiting a few minutes, for example, for it to be fast finalized in a, let's say that it cannot be reverted back. So really having a finality which is quickly within 1, 2, or 3 blocks, for example. That's kind of our target, to really make sure that from a user perspective, a user is able to play a game, let's say, transfer a token on an asset, and have the confirmation that it has been done quite quickly.
Yeah. Now, as we're speaking about the BNB chain here, I think it's important to note that the BNB chain ecosystem comprises of like several blockchains. Could you give us an overview of this ecosystem, what the different chains are, and what the respective roles are?
Exactly. So, I mean, as a lot of people might forgot, but BNB chain started with what we call the beacon chain, which was mainly, let's say, a Tendermint-based blockchain, which was really heavily used for swap of tokens. So decentralized, like DeFi in a way, where it was really quick, like block, quite rapid, large block, which was really quick and fast. But this was not, let's say, EVM compatible. So this is why BNB Chain, Smart Chain, started, I think, almost 3 years ago now. I think we have our anniversary in September. So this is more like an EVM chain. And this one is more here for programmability. So this is where most of our activity is happening right now with DeFi, gaming, and other apps. But nevertheless, this is not necessarily enough to scale in a Web3 environment. So for that reason, we have as well like zkBNB, which is more, let's say, for scalability, or ep.BNB, which is coming as well. But on top of that, Web3 it's not only transfer of asset or token, it's as well data or storage. So we've seen like lately a lot of usage on, let's say, Filecoin, Arweave, or IPFS as well. So we're like trying to understand, okay, what are those value proposition for the decentralized network, and how we can potentially, what are the pain points that those solutions are not able necessarily to answer right now. So we had a lot of discussion like with our community and internally, and that's when we decided to spin off as well like Greenfield, which is our decentralized network storage, and which is as well like based on Tendermint, but heavily connected with BSC. So it can provide programmability on top of data. So we really try to have, let's say, fast transaction for data and asset, storage capability with decentralization, like with Greenfield as well. And then like BSC, which is, let's say, the main settlement layer, as we call it, because this is where the most of the value is handled, but then different layer for different, let's say, focus aspects of specific app or specific usage. For example, like data is more okay, Greenfield, then for specific easy NFT or asset transfer might be zkBNB, which is really fast and cheap. If it's, let's say, more for a gaming or DeFi, we then have the ep.BNB, which is EVM compatible as well, which is cheaper and faster as well than any other layer out there.
Yeah, so the rationale kind of behind this modular design is to cater to any kind of use cases that developers or apps that want to be built on top of blockchain infrastructure would have.
It's not easy for a developer necessarily to grasp all of it, because like where to build is not easy to define before you start, especially that what I would suggest is like, okay, when you start, feel free to start on the layer 1, because of course, first of all, it's not as expensive as people think. Like we've quite reduced as well the transaction cost lately, and it can help you to gain a bigger community. And once your community is having a certain size, then it makes sense to, okay, resync your infrastructure and see to which layer you should move based on the activity of your user as well. So that's for sure. If you want to start as a developer, just try to sync easily. Just start with the main layer. And then once you grow, once you have a bigger team as well, you'll have time to really think of like where to move next, basically.
I think that's actually really great from a builder's perspective as well. It's a very non-fragmented building process where you can go step by step within the same ecosystem, starting from L1 and building on top. So I really like that. Now, I was going to ask that given your architecture, which apps are best suited to be built on the BNB chain, but of course you're catering to many different use cases, so pretty much everything. So maybe I'll tune the question to where you're currently internally focusing most on catering to in terms of what you want to be built within your ecosystem.
We are heavily focusing on scalability with like our layer 2s and on data, so with Greenfield as well. So that's, let's say, from a product perspective. But actually internally, one of our like main roadmap as well is like the decentralization and the transparency. So that's why we've heavily working as well on like expanding our validator set to really bring more partners around and make sure that our, let's say, network, even by growing in a modular aspect, is growing not only from a product perspective, but as well from a community and a decentralized aspect as well. So it's kind of easy to have new product, but it's not as easy to have new builders on top of it. So we really want to try to grow as well from a core developers perspective to make sure that, okay, we have more validator, more community, which are helping us to maintain and enhance as well the core product.
Got it. Focus on users for a bit and look at like general user activity metrics. You are currently the most actively used L1. Can you shed some light on who your main users are right now and what they are mainly using BNB Chain for?
Right. So I think it was like interesting to see the growth like in terms of users as well. So we definitely had a big spike during the the DeFi wave, let's say. Like we have, of course, like PancakeSwap was our main, let's say, product. So we had a lot of users who were able to utilize DeFi in a cheap way as well. So I think it's really great for like, in a way, to adopt technology, especially for a lot of people. It's like trying to get out of the banking system. So being able to use a DeFi solution with cheap transaction, I think was really great. But we've seen lately as well, like more socialized app or gamify app as well, which are taking over in terms of usage. So it's not necessarily about DeFi anymore, but it's mainly about day-to-day usage. So people which are really able to come, just have fun trying to play a game, and then, but at the same time, when you link such kind of tools with a token economy behind or with rewarding as well a user, I think this is where we can really merge and see the usage and why we need Web3 as well. Like being able to give custody to people of their assets or of the game character, for example, is something that we can see that our community is really fan of. And this is where we can see that we're able to achieve such kind of new growth within our ecosystem.
Yeah, I love that. And I think it was about a month or two ago when I spoke with the head chef from PancakeSwap, and he really spoke highly of how welcoming the BNB Chain ecosystem is and how like easy it is to enter from both a builder's and user's perspective. So it definitely aligns with what you're saying there. Now, you mentioned that the trend is going more towards like everyday use cases. How do you see this activity developing in the even longer term? And what are you doing to kind of best facilitate this development?
I mean, sometimes it's easy to have, we've seen to other like L1 as well, other protocol, it's easy to have, let's say, a spike of user. You just need to have one project which is high, it generates a lot of transaction, like airdrops, for example, or people which are trying to do farming for 1 or 2 days. But the aim is not to have like spiked of user, it's really to have a constant growth and keep having those users coming on like on a daily basis. Like if a user is not able to sustain coming on chain frequently, it means that there is something wrong with our product as well. So we need to make sure that like this is our focus, to make sure that users, once they are here, they are coming on and on again, which means like they have a good infrastructure. Like you don't want a user like signing transaction and having to sign it again because it hasn't been validated on time, or the gas fee has been increased while he was signing and then no validator is taking his transaction. So this is really like our focus is. And if we want to grow as well within our product, like when we use day-to-day product, if you use, I don't know, Facebook, Instagram, or Snapchat, you are using it on a day-to-day basis. It's not something that you go every 1 time per week or twice every month. It's really something that you are going like on a day-to-day basis. So this is really our focus, to be able to have users which have products on our chain which they want to use on a day-to-day basis, where they want to be active inside it, be active within this community, and that's the infrastructure that we provide for them or that our community is providing to them is able to support their need as well. And it's the same for a builder. When you're a builder, if you have a game project or a DeFi or socialized project, you want to be able to have your community which is coming frequently. You want to make sure that the place you are building on is able to sustain as well a user which can come on a day-to-day basis or a few times per week, where they're not going to suffer from, let's say, transaction which cannot get validated on time, or if you don't want them to have a bad experience. It's hard to sustain a user in your ecosystem. It's easy to gain new one, but once they are here, to be able to maintain them, I think it's the hardest part.
Exactly. So striving for sustainable growth by providing a superior user experience, as it should be.
Exactly. Yeah, we don't want to. It's nice sometimes to see spikes, of course, but usually when you see the spikes, like a few days after, everything is coming down again. So our aim is really to have a sustainable growth and have like kind of a not plateau in terms of user, but really see a growth of it.
Yeah, I love that, because that's the type of growth that actually matters.
Exactly.
Now, you have managed to build a really sustainable user base that is trending in the right direction. And with that position as kind of the market leader in terms of user activity, how would you describe the broader blockchain landscape in general and your position within it right now?
Definitely, it's like a good question, because out there's quite a lot of choices now for users. What is great, nevertheless, like with one wallet, you can jump from one ecosystem to the other without necessarily like regenerating a new wallet or changing your mnemonic. So this is great nowadays that a lot of L1 are having the same, let's say, wallet type, which is really easy for a user to be able to switch from one to the other or to play into multiple ecosystem and environment. It's really hard to answer this question, because at the end, like I think we are still at the phase where everyone is really growing and in an early phase, where we can see that we are not necessarily the only one with a modular approach, but where all, let's say, builders in different ecosystems are trying to resolve more or less the same issue that everyone is facing, which is like infrastructure scalability. Right now, we feel that we are able to perform quite well in this ecosystem, but definitely I think it's quite challenging to grow and to make sure that everyone has the same, let's say, because the user base is quite small, let's be honest. So how to make sure that this user base is staying within our ecosystem. It's quite hard to action, but we are working heavily every day to make sure that we're able to keep them within our ecosystem as well.
Yeah, got it. And I think what you said in the very beginning about the BNB chain's core value proposition gives a lot of insight as well into how you are positioned within the whole blockchain landscape. So that's kind of where you're building your moat. Now, maybe a bit more of a specific question about market positioning, and especially long term, is that what do you see as the end game for BNB chain then? As you are building this ecosystem of blockchains catering to all different kind of use cases, what is the vision for when crypto becomes mainstream? What is the BNB ecosystem's role?
So, I think one of the main key aspects that we are trying to do as well is try to see what's happening outside of BNB chain, because we see that there is a lot of good as well, like research outside, let's say in the ETH community or Polygon or other ones, where we are not the only one trying to bring as well those mass adoption and trying to bring product for the future. So definitely the end goal would be, like I would say, everyone to make sure that people are able to easily use. Let's say that people should use blockchain without knowing that they are using it in a way. So definitely, like, there is some key measure, like such as wallet management is something that we need to be able to understand and make sure that we can reply to such kind of problematic as well. So our end goal is really to be able to have, and this is why we have this modular approach as well, where developers can easily build application where user is not necessarily like aware by what kind of tool this app is powered by, basically. So it should be really transparent for user. We are still far from it, but I think the direction of the community is there. I think we all agree that, okay, people should be able to use this technology without necessarily like seeing it. So I think this is the end goal for BSC as well, where we have this modular approach where developers or builder can connect to it and making sure that within a Web3 environment, they can store data, transfer assets, have a self-custody as well, manage wallet in a better way, to trying to make sure that all a product can be developed within a Web3 environment and not necessarily like scattered between Web2, Web3, and having like centralized or decentralized aspect as well. So it's easier for user to make sure that everything is in a decentralized environment.
Got it. We've been speaking about like the users and then both the builders who build on top of the BNB chain. If we flip to your side of the table, I would love to hear what the different teams and their roles are that are contributing to the core development of the BNB chain. And especially because you have this modular design, it would be interesting to hear how development is structured with all these different chains.
Right. We try to have a really community-driven approach as well towards development. So as you say, we have like the BSC client, then we have the Beacon chain, we have Greenfield, now we have OP or zkBNB. So we try to collaborate with a lot of community projects which are helping us to, let's say, build on top of BNB chain, because like it's a community-driven project at the end. So we really need to make sure that the community is the one taking in charge of the building process. We as BNB Foundation, we try more, let's say, to coordinate a bit the development among everyone to make sure that there is like everyone is able to discuss with everyone and with each other. So we really try to make sure that everyone is able to build on top of BSC. So we have a few community teams which are working, let's say, more on the BSC client. And we do have a few challenges with our BSC clients, such as, for example, the state, the fast finality. Then we have, for example, Greenfield, which is like our data storage, decentralized data storage network. So we have specific community team which are more focusing on the storage aspect, for example. So we're trying to have different community team which are working as well together to try to build a more robust and like engaged ecosystem.
That makes sense. Thank you. Now I want to move on to speak about the economic model and financials. To start off, it'd be good if you could just give like a high level overview of the BNB Chain's economic model. I think that's a good place to start.
Right. So it's a deflationary mechanism. So I don't know if you know, but we had like initially a certain set of tokens. I think it was 200 million. I'm not sure exactly about the number. And it's going down day by day, basically. For each transaction that you are doing, we are burning, for example, 10% of it. And then every quarter, we are having a heavy burn as well. So from an economical model, it's really like a deflationary mechanism. And for the validators as well, we don't have block reward like other chain, for example. So the only way for a validator to make a yield out of his stake is really based on the number of transactions that are on chain. So for a user, every time you pay for your transaction, there is 90% of it that is redistributed to a validator and 10% which are getting burned. The validator, of course, is not receiving that entirely of 90% of it because you have delegation from the community as well. So me as a community member, I can delegate my BNB to a specific validator and I can then get a yield out of it as well. So this is how we have as well. Our governance model is working with validators as well. So each validator has a specific voting power and this voting power power is ranked based on the number of BNB that are staked to them. So that's how you as a community, you can impact as well the chain, which is by delegating to a certain validator that you might feel is doing, let's say, specific growth within the community that you really enjoy, and then you want to support him as well. So that's how you can support specific validator or the grow as well.
That's a great overview. Then I want to speak about economic sustainability quickly, because I think that's a topic that divides a lot of opinions when it comes to blockchains. I know you have a deflationary model, which in my mind is like very clear to understand is, okay, that sounds economically sustainable. You don't have inflationary pressure on the token, so value can kind of stay within the ecosystem. But how would you define economic sustainability from the perspective of a blockchain?
It's really complex, because I think and it's interesting to see that there are so many different models out there. There are some chain which are like, for example, dual tokens, some which are like inflationary, some which is between both. So based on activity, it can deflate or it can inflate. So I think it's really hard to understand. I mean, I don't think that there's the best model. I think there is multiple models, and like each of them have specific like pros and cons. So it's really about like I said, really understanding it and see the usage of like how the token is used as well, and how you as a user knowing that, okay, this is based on my activity, this is how I should have, like how many tokens I should have. So this is where like BNB Chain is quite different as well from the other. Like due to our high capacity, let's say our transaction cost is pretty constant. So as a user, you are able as well to forecast for, let's say, for the next 6 months, the amount of, let's say, native token you would need to have to support your transaction based on your activity. So I think this is something that is quite unique as well within the ecosystem as for a user. Like let's say you know that you want to do 100 transactions over the next 6 months, and you know that for each transaction it's costing you that amount of BNB. You know that in 6 months from now it's going to have the same cost as now. So I think this is really something that is interesting from a token economy point of view. I think this is something where we still need to detach each other between the USD value and the token value itself. I know a lot of people are talking about transaction fee in USD, so sometimes I feel like it's a bit misleading, because the real transaction cost is in the native token itself. So I think this is something where we still need to look into it as well as a user or builder, mainly for a builder perspective.
Yeah, got it. Economic sustainability is one topic. Another one is like value accrual and the very different models that people have for value accrual to blockchains. What is your take, and how are you thinking about it internally on where should value accrual for a blockchain come from?
I think the value is really like, it's the user which is generating the value of your chain or of your like activity. I think the more user you have which are being able to have certain product on top of your chain, then the more value it's going to generate as well. So this is, as I said before, so our like, let's say for the validator, the yield is only coming from the active transactions. So the more users we have, the more transactions we have, then the more yield our validator are going to generate. So I think it's really about, our model is really based on like having a lot of users. So the more activity we have, the more sustainable it is for our, let's say, ecosystem as well. Because if we don't have, let's say, a lot of transaction, then there's a high pressure for our validator to maintain a strong infrastructure. So this is where, let's say, we need to make sure that we have a good, sustainable user base to make sure that, okay, it's growing constantly, and then from that on, the value is going to be automatically generated, because more burn we're going to have, more reward is going to be generated for the validator, which can then, with more reward, they can then provide a better infrastructure as well, which is basically a loop. So it's like the more activity, the better infrastructure, the more activity again we can have. So that's kind of our model.
Yeah, that makes sense. And what I'm hearing there is like more user activity, so you have more fee payers, so that these fees can incentivize validators to keep doing that work they have.
Exactly.
Yeah, and so fees are definitely like up there and one of the most important metrics.
Exactly, because the more fee a validator is making, the more it's going to attract external entity to be a validator as well. So they're going to compete among each other to provide a better infrastructure for builders, better RPC connector, faster block response time as well. So this is where like it's kind of feeding in the loop in a way.
In general, I know we spoke about fees, user activity, but what would you say the best metrics are to value an L1, and what are the KPIs that matter the most?
I think the best metrics is around daily active users. So that's one of the metrics where we look quite heavily. So that's more, let's say, from an on-chain activity. And after, one of the other metrics that I'm more, like, say, from a builder perspective that I'm looking at, is how long do I need to wait before my transaction is validated on-chain. So I like to be able to send my transaction. I don't even have time to refresh the Explorer that my transaction is already validated. That's something that me as a user, I'm really like keen on looking at and making sure that whichever L1 I'm using an L1 which is like fast, instead that like I don't need to wait, and I'm sure that my transaction is going to be validated validated quickly. I think that's something that we are looking at heavily as well to make sure that we don't have a backlog in the mempool, for example.
Yeah. Now, there's debate on what L1 blockchains actually are, because people want to find some kind of model that they can compare to from the traditional world. Now, blockchains have been referred to as businesses, they've been referred to as economies, or just networks. What is your take on this? What are L1 blockchains?
It's hard to compare it with what we have like in the current world, because everything is changing so drastically, and it's such a, even me, like when I joined this fair, it was like you basically need to forget almost what you learned before to restart from new. So it's always like a new learning curve and like thinking differently compared to what you were thinking previously. I think we might not have answered yet like all those questions. It's still at the end, like we can still see it today as well. We do have a lot of research paper coming every day or every week around like how an L1 should be built. So I think we might not be able to answer today how an L1 should look like. But I think where we need to answer is like making sure that we have a community which is able to keep doing research, keep implementing and enhancing as well an L1. So the aim of an L1 is really to be, like we say, modular, but as well to grow, which means like not only growing in size, but growing in terms of technicality as well. So something that we constantly need to have new protocol features that can help to grow the capacity of an L1. So for example, one of the main challenges that we have within BSC is like due to our block capacity, which is heavy, plus our throughput, which is like we have one block every 3 seconds, as I mentioned previously. We have, for example, our ledger state is quite heavy and is quite big. So one of the main complexity that or discussion that we have is like how we can lower the size of our ledger, for example, while maintaining all the data and all the state inside. So we have like a few paper around like state expiry, for example, where we can make sure that, let's say, all data can be not flushed, but let's say saved in a different storage, for example, to lower the heaviness of the main clients. So I think we don't have yet the final answer of like what an L1 should look like, because at the end it's evolving like every 6 months or every 1 year. So it's really hard to answer this question now. I would say it's like really we need to be open to like changes as well. Otherwise we might be stuck to one key state. I think like L1, once you have programmability within a layer, you need to be modular and flexible. It's like not like other chain which are more, let's say, focusing on one key aspect where it makes sense to have, let's say, a fixed state. But for L1 with programmability, we do need to have like enhancement which are being chipped out every 6 months or 1 year.
Yeah, I do agree. I think that is a great answer in itself, even though it is a question that is like really hard to find an answer for. Follow up, if you're able to answer, if we think of like a spectrum between public goods in crypto and then more profit-driven activity, what would you say like blockchains lean more towards?
I think it's like a game theory. I think we'll see it played out differently in different chains based on the value that has been built on top of it. I think it's really hard to know, like based on the, let's see, because at the end of the day, like on each L1 there's different assets on it, and each asset has a different value. So I think those values are going to drive more or less like how the chain is going to, the direction of it as well. So I think we're going to see like different direction within different chain as well, like based on the value that is generated on it, I would say, because I think that's really like depending, I believe, based on the value that is hosted within this those chain.
Definitely. Final question on like the economic model stuff would be related to the BNB token. And I think one take within like value of blockchain networks has been that value comes from the utility of a native token of a network. Can you describe what the BNB token's utility is as of right now?
Right now, I think it's like most, I mean, as I see it, is really like being able to utilize a Web3 environment, which means like rewarding or paying transaction to the validator. So you need to have entity which are maintaining the ledger, providing the infrastructure. And right now they are getting rewarded with basically BNB. So that's kind of the yield. So as a user, you do need to, if you want to run your transaction on that one, you do need to have BNB to be able to transact. It's going to be the same once we have Greenfield, which is like the data storage layer. You'll need to incentivize storage provider by, let's say, giving them BNB in exchange of them storing your data. So that's more as the utility, I would say, is really about like utilizing it to pay for a service that validators are giving, like maintaining the ledger, maintaining the state, providing the infrastructure for you to be able to transact in a decentralized manner.
Exactly. So the utility for BNB comes from the access it gives to the block space you provide. Now, zooming out a bit from the economics and financials, what are the most exciting things happening on the BNB chain at the moment?
We have a lot of stuff cooking within the BSC ecosystem and Greenfield as well, or our layer 2s. So let's say the one I'm more excited about is the fast finality, which is going to be released. Like once we're going to make this live, I think it will be live already. So it's really about providing a finality much faster compared to what we have right now, which means that for a user, once you're going to send your transaction, I mean, first of all, it's validated quite fast, which means like usually within less than 3 seconds, it's validated, but it's not necessarily finalized at that stage. So with our new fast finality, it's going to be finalized within 2 or 3 blocks, which means that within less than 10 seconds, you can be sure that this transaction is not going to be reverted, for example. So I think this is something that I'm really like excited about. And as well, like we have a heavy work which is happening on the state, as I mentioned before, like how to manage our growing ledger too. So this state expiry, I think we are quite advanced in this research compared to other L1s. So I think it will be interesting for, let's say, other L1 as well to look into what we've been doing into this specific topic of state expiry and see like how we've been dealing with it and how potentially they could utilize what we've been doing as well. So that's more on the BSC aspect. And then I'm really excited about Greenfield. So currently Greenfield is in testnet still. And due to the programmability aspect of Greenfield and BSC, where you can potentially manage the access right of a user wallet via payment on BSC directly. So I think there's a lot of potential use cases that can be built on top of data access, data sharing, and data payment as well. So let's say you want to give access to this podcast to specific user, they can pay you, for example, via a smart contract to have a specific access to it or for a specific period of time. So I think this is where I'm really looking at. And then as well, like the zkBNB mainnet, which will be launched soon, or ep.BNB as well, which has some key differentiator compared to the other one, like on other ones. So really looking forward for those kind of delivery from our community, so people can really see like that there's quite a lot of innovation happening as well within the BSC ecosystem.
Yeah, also looking forward to seeing how all those upcoming launches play out. Does sound exciting. Now, in general, what are the biggest drivers or challenges, there's always challenges, related to your growth right now?
One of the biggest challenge is like the lack of Web3 developers. I think there's a lot of people having good ideas, but maybe they have a lack of people who can help them to deliver their ideas as well. So we do have a lot of contact with different projects that are building on top of BSC, but sometimes it takes time, to deliver because you need to have resources as well, and those resources cost money as well. So I think it's really about like having a good set of builders which can really deliver new ideas. I think this is one of the challenges that we have as well, try to attract a wider developer community to make sure that we have enough builders within like the ecosystem, not only within BSC, but I think within the whole blockchain industry. We need to have more people which are able to build. I think it's really great to see in some university that like blockchain is starting to become more mainstream as well. So I believe that in the next few years, we're going to have more builders which are directly able to build using the Web3 mindset as well. Because sometimes you have Web2 developer, we want to move to Web3. It's not so hard at the end to move when we look at the technical aspect, but it's harder to move from let's say, the way you are building an application is completely different in Web3 as you would do it in Web2. So I think it's more about like this aspect of building that is quite challenging for people.
That's a really great point. I'm glad you brought that up because that's definitely a bottleneck.
Yeah, I mean, sometimes when we go to some event, I feel like we always see each other. We always see the same people. So like we can see that there is a lack of people in a way, because when you go like, let's say from the US to Europe or to Asia, we should not meet each other. Like it would be great if we sometimes see new faces as well. So definitely I think there's a lack of newcomers in a way.
Definitely. I feel like the market sentiment and everything going on, like the regulatory environment, doesn't help us there. But I guess the true builders and people who find interest in the fundamentals of everything that's going on will still be attracted because they're stronger than they've ever been.
Right. And I think once as a user, you really understand why we need Web3 and why it matters, I think you really abstract about what's happening outside. You really focus more like on building. So that's why we are really focusing on like trying to build as much as we can and just focusing on delivering something great, because we are here because we know why we are here as well. And we don't look at what's happening outside, let's say. But for that, you really need to be understanding of like why it matters.
Exactly. As it should be. That's where the focus should be. It's good. There's so much noise. You need to cancel that out. On the growth side, I've familiarized myself with your ecosystem growth strategy, which has quite a few components in it. It would be great if you can kind of walk me through what that growth strategy currently is and how you are investing in the ecosystem.
We do try to perform like a few different hackathons around towards like a few times per year, virtual one as well as like offline ones. So we do try to, let's say, be closer to our community in different locations as well. Then we have different programs, like for example, the most valuable builder, which is a program for builders to really showcase what they're capable of doing. Then we're able to select a few and really try to be more closer with them to really try to guide them in a way, which means like trying to provide technical support or marketing support to really make sure that they understand like how they can grow within the ecosystem as well. So it's not necessarily about providing support from a financial point, but it's as well providing support from a marketing perspective, from a like how to grow your community in Web3, how to grow your company as well. Because like building in Web3 means building a company as well. So we have a lot of builders, they might not see it, but when they are building a project, it's like if they are building a real company. So there's like some challenges ahead of them as well. So trying to provide as well some support on that aspect. That's where we try to provide our main support as well.
Yeah. Now, we've covered a lot of ground, also including some upcoming developments, but to maybe wrap this session up, what's next for the BNB chain? Is there anything else that you haven't yet covered that you'd like touch on from your mid to long-term roadmap or just general topics?
I think we've covered quite a lot. Definitely like our main topics as always, performances, infrastructure, and decentralization as well. I might have forgot to talk about security. I think we haven't touched base a lot around the security. So we do try to provide some community projects as well, which are focusing on the security aspect, such as DAP, for example, which is trying to provide alerts to like when something is happening on chain to specific smart contract. So we do try to as well provide those kind of alerts for our community. Like please feel free to follow up DAP or go to the website where like when there's any breach, let's say security aspect happening to a specific contract, we try to notify our community as fast as possible because we are able to provide, let's say, some monitoring to make sure that everything is kind of safe. So we want to be a safe place as well. We don't want to have a lot of hack happening. So we want to provide measures and mechanism as well for people to try to do on-chain transaction in a safe way. So that's one of our key focus as well for the next months is how to bring a higher level of security within Web3. Because we've seen that a lot of rug pull happen or a lot of hack is happening as well. So how we can mitigate or try to erase stuff like that and really bring a higher level of security. Because if you want to grow, I mean, right now we don't have that many users compared to other Web2 products. We need to be realistic. But once we have like more millions of users, 1 billion users, we need to make sure that our platform is like secure as well. So what kind of secure layer we could potentially integrate within our ecosystem to make sure that the platform is secure for a user to use and for a builder to build on as well. Because security within Web3 is something that sometimes is neglected. So we need to make sure that each project is aware of like the security aspect of their project as well, and their contract or the backend services or the key management. So there's a lot of education to do around security, especially for new builders where they haven't experienced what older experienced builders have experienced in the past. Like when you have a new builder, they might not necessarily pay as much attention to the security as someone which has 2, 3, or 4 years experience in the industry. So really how we can make sure that those newcomers are putting the security aspect as priority one, because it should be the first priority before building and delivering anything.
Definitely. It does sound like you are focusing on the right things. So that's always great to hear. Thank you so much, Arno, for this compact overview of the BNB chain and everything going on right now. I hope that we can dive into some of these topics in more detail in the future. But as of now, looking forward to seeing how all your upcoming launches play out, and appreciate you taking the time to do this.
And so I'm looking forward to potentially come back and do a follow-up like on what's happening. Like let's say in 6 months, we could like see, okay, what has been done, what has been missing, how we are looking at as well, like, okay, what we've been lagging maybe, and how we are working to fix what has been fixed as well, and how we can embrace more a community developer focus as well.
Looking forward to that. Thank you, Arno.
Thank you.